All right, Gutenberg. So Gutenberg starts a printing press. People start printing. One of the first things that gets printed is the Bible. So that by the early 1500s, you have Luther, who um, nails his theses, his 95 theses, to the door of the church to say how the church could be improved. And that sets off the Protestant Reformation. So you've got all of this activity going on, and then that is what leads into um, the kind of writing that we're talking about, starting in the late 1700s and into the 1800s. After that, um, around the 1800s, and again, we can talk about that too if we want, you start having the Industrial Revolution, which ends up leading directly to the world that we inhabit today. Now, what's this got to do with the four human sciences that I just mentioned? Well, if you think about the Industrial Revolution, people have been living in pretty stable worlds for years and years and years, and like centuries without a whole lot of change. And then all of a sudden, people start putting together factories. People start moving to cities. Cities start growing. The world started looking very, very, very differently. And it's exactly that point in time when Marx starts writing, and what he is looking at is how this world is changing, what that means for the people who are part of it. Marx would eventually say that he expected that industrial capitalism to take over the world, and one could argue in today's world that he's probably was right about that. But that was just one half of what was going on. The other half of what was going on was, as European conquest had spread around the world for the couple centuries prior, as industrial capitalism grew and grew and grew, it became clear to people who were looking at old-fashioned ways of life, what in the past would have been called primitive tribes, that their ways of life were going to be changed too. So by around the 1900s, you have folks who recognize that if they don't go out and explore the world, find how people are living, and document it, then those life ways, the understandings of those life ways, will be lost forever, as the world eventually does become what we think of as modern. And so, really, the heyday of the anthropologists that I'm thinking of is, in like the 20s through the 50s. Actually, Geertz and those guys was really 50s and 60s. But so the anthropologists, anthro is man, pology is study of, so anthropology is the study of man. Looks a lot like sociology, right? Well, the anthropologists, they got in their boats and they went and found the primitive, quote unquote, people to do ethnographies and try and document how they were living before the modern world changed them. The sociologists, and soci would be society, and ology is, again, the study of, they were the folks who stayed home to try and understand how modern society was changing the world at home, the world in the West that they were living in. Interesting side note, sociology is a bit of a bastard term. One root comes from Greek and the other comes from Latin. I wish I remembered which. But so I don't know if it should have been sociopoly. I don't know. Never mind. You can Google that. You can chat GPT that if you care. Okay, so the anthropologists are the ones who went out to try and study the quote-unquote primitive people before they changed. The sociologists were the ones that stayed home to try and understand how society was changing as it went through the Industrial Revolution and forward. Historically, anthropology was mostly qualitative. meaning it wasn't numbers based, it was understanding based. You talk to the people, you learn the language, you learn their symbols, you tried to understand what their world meant to them. Whereas sociology has tended to be much more numbers based, survey, stats, data, and that's all the way from the very beginning. You remember I said at the beginning of this that the Holy Trinity was Marx, Durkheim, Weber. Well, Durkheim was one of the very first quantitative treatises, which we'll study later, suicide, and from then on, sociology has been interested in trying to capture these things mathematically, so quantitatively. So that's sociology and anthropology. The next one is economics, and economics is the reason I was thinking all the way back to the 1700s is because Adam Smith, whose book The Wealth of Nations is where it might be the first time that the free hand of the market is discussed. At the very least, it's one of the earliest. And he's trying to understand the economy, how money flows through society as we understand it. Since money is an abstraction of value, it turns out to be a very good way to talk about the way that the world works. And as Marx wouldn't have called himself a sociologist, Marx would have called himself an economist. So Marx would have been writing to some extent in response to someone like Adam Smith. When we get later in the course, you're going to see that Weber then is responding in kind to Marx. Okay, so where economy is about money, the abstract money, and how it works inside a society. So the three human sciences you have there are anthropology, sociology. Now we've covered economics. They tend to be very, very, very quantitative. The last one I want to talk about is psychology. Psychology, people have often wondered about what made individual humans tick. For a very long time here in the States, you could go all the way back to Benjamin Rush, which was about Ben Franklin's time, so about revolutionary times, writing about mental disorders. And so people have always kind of wondered what made individual people tick, but what makes psychology and sociology different? Well, my favorite metaphor for that is the anthill. When you accidentally step on a bed of fire ants, you get bit by a dozen ants, and it sucks. So when the anthill swarms out, they're all acting together. They're acting as the ant colony protecting their colony. Of course, each and every individual ant bites you. Well, sociology is about the way the ant colony works, how they communicate to everybody, attack at the same time. Psychology is about the individual ant, who's now who knows how much agency ants actually have, but they're whether they're biting or carrying off larvae or deciding to be pacifist ants, who knows? But whatever's going on for that individual ant, that's what the psych would be studying. Whatever's going on with the whole colony, that's what the sociologist would study. Now, there's a certain amount of friendly competition between all of these disciplines, but you can see that they all really are of a piece in the human sciences trying to understand what's going on. Despite the friendly competition, it's important to recognize that they really are just different parts of the elephant, right? There's that story about the blind men standing around the elephant trying to figure out what it is, and the one's feeling the tusk, and the other's feeling the ear, and the third is feeling um, the the tail, and they have no idea they're looking at the same thing. But you don't have an elephant without tusks, trunk, tail, and the floppy ears. That's what the elephant is. Well, in the same way, you know, uh, you don't have a society without individual humans. You don't have individual humans without society. Individual humans in different societies end up very different. What your society is plays a huge role in making you who you are, and vice versa. Um, oh, there goes the hummingbird. Vice versa, who what the individual people do adds up to be what the society is. So even though psych and sociology sort of have a little bit of friction occasionally, again, friendly competition. Um, you don't. They're flip sides of the same coin. You don't have a human without society, and you don't have society without an aggregate of humans. Um, Same thing goes with anthropology. Yes, the anthropologists went out to study primitive people and uh, understand their life ways, their worlds of meaning, what the world looked like to them, how they understood it. But as we go through the course, you'll recognize that the way that they make their living, um, while maybe different than, for instance, modern Westerners, it's still important. The way we make our living is like the basis of what we do, and it's kind of Marx's whole point. Um, and the um, brain fart. Oh, and part of the way we make our living is working together to accomplish things. Well, in modern world, we think of economics as goods and services being exchanged in the abstract um, quantifier of money. Um, but exchanging goods and services is everybody helping each other. So even societies that are um, 12 people who are working together to accomplish thing, them working together to accomplish that thing is the economics of their world. So even in sociology, we'll study money, we'll study culture and meaning, and and so all of these disciplines work together to try and get a holistic view of the human, but or of human society, but they're all doing it from a little bit different angles. So I think that's enough for this one. We've got sociology, anthropology, economics, psychology, and yes, there we go. All right, thanks.